Alright, so last time we did images, and we covered sort of a lot of ground with that. What I'd like to do is review it, see if you have any questions, and then go on to look at other uses of images. So here's the example that we had from last time. Again, just to be sure, whenever I have a lecture posted, typically the file right underneath it is the file that contains the examples. I've heard some people say that the videos are hard to see exactly what's going on, and I can appreciate that. I can understand that. However, if you download the examples and are looking at the examples on your computer screen while you're watching the video, that might help you some. So let me download this example. And I'm going to extract it. It's in this folder. It's actually in a folder inside that folder. I'm going to rename it to Thursday so I can post it today when I'm done making changes to it. And here you go. And if I'm not mistaken, I put the images on the home page. We actually did a couple things last time. We'll take a minute to review both of them. First of all, we created an external CSS file. We had talked about CSS files. We had talked about CSS in the preceding class and showed how you can change colors and all that. But what we did this time is we put the CSS actually in its own separate file. And the advantage of that is it can be shared between all of our web pages. So I have this file, style CSS. Notice that there is no style tag in this file. Okay? So, unlike when the CSS is in the page itself, you don't have to include the style tag. The browser already knows that this is a CSS file based on how you link to it. So the only thing that's in here is the style rules, which again, style rules consist of a selector. The selector says, hey, this tag gets this rule, whatever this rule might be. And in this case, the rule contains the color, which is a text color. So it's attribute, colon, value, then a semicolon, then the next attribute, colon, value. So everything in the body gets this. Well, that's everything, right? Because all your tags virtually are in the body. We then can override that style rule for more specific tags. H1s get this rule. H2s get this rule. Footer gets this rule. And this one says any link within the footer gets this rule. Okay? And we associate that with the HTML page by having this right here. And we can do that for all of our pages. So we did that with all of our pages. And of course, that has the advantage of if we make our change in one place, then that that change is everywhere throughout the site in all the pages. And that's a big advantage because you can have dozens, hundreds of pages even on a website. And to be able to change the style of all of them in one swoop is really a big deal. All right? So many things we do in all variations of software development is about how to make it easy to change once you've completed it. All right? And this is an example in web development of how that principle pops up. We keep the HTML and the CSS separate so we can change the CSS without having to go in and changing each individual HTML page. All right, the other thing we did is we looked at the image tag. And we talked about obtaining images. And we talked about copyright. And in a nutshell, if you take an image, you own the copyright to it. So if you had a website and you had a restaurant that you wanted to do a website about, if you went and took the pictures, there's no problem with copyright. You own the copyright, you can put them on your site. All right? Another way that you can obtain images, we didn't talk about all of these, but we'll add a couple more of them in, is you could hire a professional photographer. Like, let's say you didn't have the equipment or the photography skill to take really good pictures of your restaurant. You could hire a professional photographer to come in and take pictures of your restaurant. All right? And so effectively you'd be buying the pictures off of that person. You can actually use what's called a stock photo agency. Stock photos are sort of generic photos. You see them a lot in memes. All right? The guy, who's the guy in the meme? The guy that has the short gray hair with the gray beard that always looks like he's trying to smile. Harold. Is that his name, Harold? Yeah. I got to Google it now. Well, yeah, this guy. Hide the pain, Harold. Because he always looks like he has kind of a smile, but he doesn't look too happy despite of that. And these start out as stock photos. In other words, some photographer took pictures of them and made them available if you wanted to use, his picture. You could purchase it from him. And there's really a funny story. I mean, funny stories about this guy. He talks about his reaction, the actual guy. And he talks about it. Hide the Pain, Harold. Came from a photo shoot he'd done a year ago when he was still an electrical engineer. And he got contacted by journalists. People came to interview him. And so on. In a nutshell, he said it was kind of a pain at first, but then it got to be kind of cool. So, and he got a TV commercial out of the deal. So, good for him, right? But anyhow, there's any number of stock photography sites where you can purchase stock photos from a professional photographer, or high-quality photos anyhow. And it's not as much as hiring someone to come and take pictures specifically for you. I'll give you an example. Let's say Lorain Community College was doing a website. Well, they do have a website. But let's say we wanted a picture of students sitting around discussing something, sitting around a table. All right? We could actually hire a photographer to come and take a picture of actual students here in the College Center doing that. But to hire a photographer would be relatively expensive. So what you could do is you could go and for not that much money, you could get a stock photo of not necessarily students from LC, but just students. And no one would really know the difference, right, unless there was some landmark in the picture. But for example, you could buy this picture of a group of people studying. And it's $33 to purchase that. Again, that's cheap compared to if you were to hire a professional photographer to come in and take pictures for you. The other ways, of course, are you can look for pictures licensed under the Creative Commons license or pictures that are in the public domain. And Google Image Search has the ability to search for that. So if you are searching for, if you wanted a picture of students, we could look for students. And we could say, I want a picture of students which is free to use, share, or modify even commercially. So these pictures are all available that you could use them on your website. Most of these are younger students, but there are some of older students as well. Okay, so the bottom line is make sure you obtain the pictures legally. And for this class, there's more flexibility because we're doing things for educational purposes, but still give credit to where you've got the images from. All right? Just a nice little link at the bottom of the page is sufficient. All right? That's a good sort of thing to put in the footer of your site. If you really have a lot of images, like for example, maybe for your final project, maybe have a separate credits page that would say, if you don't want to have, if you had 15 pictures and you didn't want to clutter the footer of every page with the URLs of 15 pictures, you could create a separate credits page if you wanted to. All right. The one thing that we learned about images is that you should always take a backup of the image before you begin. All right? Because if you edit it, especially if you make it smaller and then try to make it bigger again, you've lost some definition in it. You've lost some quality, and you can't get that back through photo editing. So keep a copy of the image at the original size, and then if you decide to resize the image, go ahead and do it. But if that doesn't go well, go back to the copy. All right, and I think we showed an example with this winter image where I made it really small, and then I went in and made it bigger again, and it was all fuzzy. Unfortunately, I didn't really follow what I preached, and I did make a copy of it at the time, but I didn't save the copy of it. So we're kind of out of luck with that image. But that's okay. It showed its point. Now, an image consists of a tag, which is an IMG tag. There really isn't an end image tag, because there's nothing between the start and end image tag. And you can designate that by ending the start tag with a / greater than sign. That says, hey, this is a starting and ending tag rolled into one. You actually don't have to do that, but I usually do that, just to be obsessive about making sure every start tag has an ending tag. An image tag has two attributes. It has a source attribute, and it has an alt attribute. The source attribute specifies the location of the file that's going to be used. And if the location of the file is on your website and is in the same folder as your web pages, you just need to put the full file name. And the full file name is the file name plus the extension. And we talked about that last time. Winner.jpg, dd.jpeg. You have to match that exactly. The alt is an alt text attribute, and that is used primarily for people that are accessing your page via a screen reader. A screen reader is software that actually narrates the web page to you. It's typically used by people that are blind or otherwise visually impaired, and they're able to access and get around the site and get the information of it through the use of a screen reader. So the alt attribute, again, at least gives them an idea of what the picture is for. And that can be useful. Yes?
Good example, being careful about using the photography like that. Iowa Republican candidate Steve King is being sued by the mother of the kid that's the Success Kid meme. The little kid with the fistful of sand, just like he's got the
really?
tail, because they use it in his campaign.
Wow. Wow. There's also a problem about what is called hot linking to an image. Does anyone know what I mean by hot linking? Hot linking is where I put the actual URL of the image out on the web. So for example, I copied that Dungeons and Dragons picture here, right? I copied it to my disk, and I'm using the name. You can actually create an image like this. I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to tell you not to do it. All right. Let's say I find an image that I want to use. Let's say I want to use, I don't know. I suppose it doesn't matter, does it? This one. Copy image address. There's that image. I can actually use that as a source attribute. All right, and it shows up. And I don't have to download the image, and I don't have to save the image to my disk drive, and so on. All right, now that we've seen how to do that, hot link the image, I'm going to tell you not to do it. Why should you not do that? Yeah.
Well, it's accessing their server for it, so you're using up their resources.
You're using up their resources, for one. And if there was sufficient, that could actually, if there's sufficient traffic, that could cause a problem on their server that they're loading it. What's another reason you wouldn't do that? Yes?
If something happens to their web page, like it gets shut down or something, or if the image is moved or changed at all, then it won't show up on your page.
Exactly. If something were to happen to their website, if they reorganize their website and move files around, or if their website was shut down or whatever, then your image would be broken. Yes?
Show a little broken image icon.
It would show a little broken image icon. Probably would show the alt text. There's even something worse than that if the person wanted to be malicious at the other end. they could substitute any other image for this image. And I've heard that of happening as well. When someone hot linked to an image, someone malicious could go and put any sort of image that you would not want people from your website to see there. And because you hot link to it, it's out of your control. All right? So the bottom line is don't do this. Don't hot link to an image. Because someone at the other end, again, could switch it to a totally different image, and you'd be vulnerable to that. Instead, make sure that you're pointing to an image that you've downloaded. Yes?
It could also be bad if they actually, it was hot linked and they went to, clicked on it to go to the site, if there was something malicious on the site.
Possibly, yeah. In general, don't hot link images. Okay. Now, images sort of serve two roles on web pages. Images supply information, right? In other words, if you show a picture of the Super Bowl, someone making a catch for a touchdown or whatever, you're conveying information about what happened. That's just information in a different form. Instead of in text, you're using images to convey some information. So images can be viewed as content because they're additional information that you're supplying. Images can also be used just to sort of serve purposes of aesthetics, of decorating the page, and so on. All right? And that's a valid use as well. And one of the things that you can use images for that doesn't require an image tag, but allows you to put the images in the CSS is with background images. So let me look for a website with a background image. Here's an older article, but here's one. Instead of the background being a color, I wish there was a link to it, but they took a screenshot, which is just about as good. Instead of the background being a color, the background is this kind of image. Here we've used a background of the skyline of Seattle, and so on. Here's one, and this is something that's often used a lot, is that the page is essentially solid, but there's a background image that sort of forms a frame or a border around the image, the text, and so on. So we're going to look at some of these things that you can do on a website. All right. So we're going to play a little bit more with CSS, and we are going to add on a background image. Now, a lot of times, background images are kind of like if you've ever put like tile on a floor, all right, or like on a wall, all right. They have a pattern that when you line up the tiles next to each other, it sort of makes a bigger pattern, All right? In other words, the pattern lines up. So a lot of times patterns like that are used. All right? So let's look at some resources on the web. Let's look for background tile. Well, let's look for a background tile generator. All right. Well, let's change the color. Let's make it red. I don't know what this is doing. Too much work. Let's look at this one. This is simple enough. I don't know why I'm messing with it, getting it perfect. This is just an example. All right, so I went and I've generated the tile. All right. Now I can download it. All right. And that'll give me an image. That is called stripe blah 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 .png. And notice how it's just a tiny little stripe. All right? But when we tile these things, we're going to stack them side by side, horizontally, and side by side vertically. It's going to make the bigger pattern. It's going to make the pattern that we saw of long black and red vertical stripes. So I'm going to rename this to be just stripe, because I don't want to type all that stuff in. And I'm going to go into CSS, and where it says background, #909090, I'm going to change that to say background URL, and then I'm going to say stripe.png. Again, it's in the same folder, right? So all I do is give the file name. And in this case, it's not a color, so I don't use the hex code or I don't type in the color name, but it's a file, so I use URL. So now if I look at that page, I get that, which is a little hard to read, right? Because of this stuff and this stuff. That's the one thing that you run into difficulty with this, is that when you use background patterns like this, it makes everything, you run the risk of the background pattern interfering with the text. But there's some things we could do to fix this. We could maybe make a different color text, or maybe we could put a background color on certain areas of the page. So let's look at this page. I'm going to go and I'm going to add the header tag. And then I'm going to add 3 sections. I'm going to do that because I'm going to start putting style in these sections. Again, sort of all the content in the body should be grouped into these main sections: header, footer, nav, section, or article. So I've made some sections that I'm going to put my content in. And initially that's not going to really matter because I haven't done anything style-wise with them, but I can go and I can add some CSS here and say, for example, maybe each section I want the background to be white. And then I have, what I'm getting to with this is that background pattern, which kind of looked obnoxious when it covered the entire screen, doesn't look quite so bad now when it's just sort of peeking out of the sides of this. Okay? I could make some other changes here. I'm going to center the content in the page and sort of leave a picture frame around it. All right? So let's go and do that. I'm going to put on each of my sections a width. Width equals 600 px. Px stands for pixel. Pixel is a little dot on the computer screen. There are approximately 1,000 pixels on the display of this, 1,000 and change. So 600 pixels is about 60% of the screen. All right. Now I want to center each of these. I can center them by saying margin 0 pixel auto. I'm going to just do this and show you the results, and I'll explain to you how it works. Margin 0 pixel and auto relates to the space between the different sections of the page. There's 4 there's 4 sides to each box on the page. So for example, if we look at the header, there's the top of the header, there's the left of the header, or right of the header, bottom of the header, left of the header. When I supply 2 numbers for the margin, I start with the top. So the top has 0 pixels, and the right has auto. And what auto means is it will automatically center it. So if I do 0 pixels auto, that's the top and the right. Because I only supplied those 2 numbers, those 2 values, it repeats. So it's 0 for the bottom again and auto for the left. So with auto on both the left and the right, the effect of that is that it centers it. Okay? I'm going to fix the little gaps. All right, so now everything is rolled together in a block. And then maybe I want the header to have a top margin of something. And I can do that by saying header (15 pixels auto, 0 pixels auto). So 15 pixels is the top margin, auto is the right, 0 pixels is the bottom margin, and then auto is the left. So there'll be some space at the top between the header and the top of the page, and then there'll be left and right margin auto, which will center it, and the bottom margin 0. What I did just up here is I effectively cleared out all the margins for everything. Started with a clean slate. I got rid of all the browser defaults for everything. All right? And if we look at that, oh, there we go. There's just a little bit of a gap on the top. We could make that bigger if we wanted to. So it kind of looks like there's a frame around this. All right? Questions about that? Now, there's all kinds of other tiles. And again, notice what I mean by tile, because remember that image is very tiny. It's only about this big. It's just when you place it side by side and down, it forms this larger pattern. There are any number of different patterns that you can get. Okay, here's one. Let's take this one. Change the name to pattern. now I can use the background for pattern.jpg. And it looks like this. I don't really like this pattern now that I look at it closer, because you can easily see the seam between the two iterations of this pattern. So let's look for a different pattern. Alright, there you can't really see the seam of where the pattern is. The pattern is designed well, so you can't really see where the pattern repeats itself. Now you could use pattern with text underneath it. You just have to be very careful of that the text is readable. Sometimes what you can do is you can sort of use a image editing tool to sort of fade out the image. Let me show you an example of what I mean. I'm actually going to make a copy of this page. And a copy of the CSS to show you what I mean. So let me do a Google search for a big picture of a dragon. Ooh, I like that one. Because unlike regular dragons, this one's shooting a laser beam. Alright. So this is sort of like the best. This is like old school legendary stuff and modern technology blended. So I like that. So I'll put it in here and I'll call it Dragon. Now, so I save that. I could actually go and make the background of the whole page that image. So I'm going to make the background for the body dragon.jpg. That was the name of it, right? Yep. And I'm going to get rid of all the backgrounds on the different sections of the page. I'll just do the section. I'll get rid of the background there. Actually, I'll get rid of all the backgrounds. Why not? I want to make this one look as different as possible from the other one. So I'm getting rid of all of the backgrounds. So now if I look at this, there I go. Now it looks really cool. Problem is that you can't read it. Alright? So, what could we do to make it readable? Well, we could actually just change the colors of a lot of this stuff, make them lighter, and that white shows up nice up against there. So we could go and we could make the color of all of our text white. All right. That's mostly readable, except when you get down here, there's like white spots in the dragon. So depending on your image, maybe you can make the color work. If you can't make the color work, what you could do is you could sort of fade the image out and like watermark it. So I'm going to do that real quick with this image. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to open this up using GIMP, which is a image manipulation program. It's free and open source, and it is about the same as, it's of a similar quality to Photoshop. I'm going to go in and I'm going to see, what do I want to do? I want to brightness and contrast. I'm going to make this image a much brighter. And less contrast. Okay, so I'm sort of fading the image a little bit. All right, and again, since we're about at the very end of class, I'm not going to worry about perfecting this, but you could go and again manipulate this image to get it to look the way you wanted it to. So I'll save it. I do, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to. Okay, and then I'm going to change the color back to black because now that I've made the image lighter, black is probably the better choice for color. Probably. Probably. Okay, so there you go. So now notice that you still get to see the cool image, but it's sort of like a watermark, and it's sort of faded in the background. And so that's an effective tool that you can use too. Especially, again, if you use any kind of, I guess it depends on the photograph that you're using. If you're using a photograph of a snowstorm or a blizzard that's primarily white, then you don't run into problems. But in pretty much most photographs or most images that you take, there's going to be a big difference between the darkest and the lightest. So it's very difficult to pick a color font that will go with it. So one thing you can do is you can fade the image. The other thing we could do, which we're not going to do today, was I could use a background on each of the sections and just make the background transparent so that you could see the image underneath it, but there was still a little bit of something to put the text on to make the text more readable. Okay, this is what we have for today. I'm going to wrap up, and we'll see you over in lab.